The Iran-Iraq War: Causes, Progression, and Consequences. The Iran-Iraq War was an 8-year-long border war that took place between Iran and Iraq. The war broke out on September 22, 1980, and the two sides officially stopped fighting on August 20, 1988, under the mediation of the United Nations. Causes. The main reasons for the outbreak of the Iran-Iraq War were, firstly, religious disputes, secondly, territorial disputes, and thirdly, ethnic conflicts caused by religious disputes and territorial disputes, which were mixed with personal decisions of the leaders of both sides. Among them, the main and direct cause was the territorial dispute. The specific reasons are as follows. First, both Iran and Iraq are Islamic countries, but more than 50 million inhabitants of Iran believe in the Shia sect of Islam, and more than half of Iraq's 16 million population are Shia, but those in power are Sunni. After Iran's victory in the Islamic Revolution that overthrew the Pahlavi dynasty, the mullahs, religious clerics, set off a religious frenzy and openly advocated the export of the Islamic Revolution to the outside world, and Iraq, being a neighboring country to Iran and with Shia Muslims accounting for over half of its population, was the first to bear the brunt of it. The Iranian leader, Khomeini, went into exile in Iraq from 1964 and was expelled to Paris in 1978 by Saddam Hussein, the current president of Iraq and the number 2 leader at that time, on the charge of inciting local Shiite rebellion, for which the two sides had formed a bitter feud. Secondly, there are 2 issues in the territorial dispute. The first is Iraq's demand for full sovereignty over the Shatt al-Arab. This issue was originally based on Saddam and the late Shah of Iran Pahlavi, signed in 1975. Algiers Agreement has been resolved. The agreement provides that the two countries constitute a common border of the Shatt al-Arab section of the river to the centerline of the river's main channel. But Saddam had always regretted signing it and took advantage of the turmoil in Iran after the Islamic Revolution to abrogate the agreement. Another issue of territorial dispute is indirect. Thirdly, as the leaders of both sides adopted a tit-for-tat policy and refused to make concessions to each other, historical national contradictions and resentments were stirred up, leading to the outbreak of war. Passage. In the first period, the war was carried out in the territory of Iran. On the morning of September 22, 1980, Iraq mobilized a large number of planes to carry out air raids on Iran's capital, Tehran, and other 15 cities and air bases. At 2 a.m. on the morning of the 23rd, 5 divisions of the ground forces were deployed, and 2 brigades with more than 1,200 tanks launched an attack on Iran on 3 routes, namely north, central, and south. By the end of October, Iran held off a full-scale attack by Iraqi forces. From March 1982, the Iranian army turned to a counteroffensive. On June 29, 1982, Iraq announced that it had withdrawn its troops from occupied Iranian territory, and the border between the two countries was restored to its pre-war condition. In the second period, the war was fought on Iraqi territory. On July 13, 1982, Iran concentrated 120,000 troops and launched the First Battle of Basra. After a number of tug-of-war battles, by the end of September, the Iranian army took control of a narrow strip of Iraqi territory, covering an area of about 200 square kilometers. Beginning in October, Iran deployed another 50,000 troops to launch an attack on the Mandali region in northern Iraq, penetrating deep into Iraqi territory and posing a threat to Baghdad. In the third period, 1986, the Iran-Iraq War became intense again. Iran reversed its past policy of fighting a war of attrition, striving for a quick decision, and in early February 1986, Iran deployed more than 90,000 troops to launch a larger-scale offensive codenamed Aurora 8, which captured the important port city of Fa in southern Iraq. Echoing the ground battlefield, the Iran-Iraq War on ships escalated again and again in 1986, with 106 ships attacked, including 28 ships entering and leaving Kuwaiti ports. In order to avoid further escalation of the war, the UN Security Council unanimously adopted Resolution 598 on July 20, 1987, calling for an immediate ceasefire between Iran and Iraq. After the adoption of Resolution 598, due to the long-standing grievances between Iran and Iraq, the ceasefire on the issue of the position of the differences, and no one is willing to take the initiative to make concessions. And thus, the United Nations Resolution 598 delayed the implementation of the resolution. The fourth period, 1988, was a year in which the Iran-Iraq War took a major turn for the worse. From February to April, the two sides used hundreds of missiles to attack each other's towns and cities, starting a war of attacks of unprecedented scale. Since then, in the hold, Iraq gradually gained the upper hand. April 17th, the Iraqi army on the Fa region of Iranian defenders launched an offensive code-named Ramadan. After 2 days of fierce fighting, in the afternoon of the 18th, all the recapture of Iranian occupation of 2 years of Fa region. Foreign military experts commented that this is a turning point in the Iran-Iraq War, which opened the door to ending the Iran-Iraq War, opening the way to peace for Iran and Iraq. Iran was forced to announce on July 18, 1988, that it agreed to accept the UN Security Council Resolution 598, and on August 20th, the Iran-Iraq ceasefire was put in place, bringing an end to the 8-year-long Iran-Iraq War. Results: truce. On July 20th, 1987, the UN Security Council adopted Resolution 598, calling for an immediate ceasefire between Iran and Iraq. The following day, Iraq said it welcomed the UN resolution and decided to suspend attacks on Iranian maritime targets as a sign of good faith. However, Iran did not take a stand, and it was not until July 18, 1988, that it announced its acceptance of Resolution 598. Losses. The 8-year Iran-Iraq War resulted in a lose-lose situation. Iraq suffered 480,000 casualties and prisoners, lost 250 combat airplanes, more than 2,000 tanks, and 1,500 artillery pieces, while Iran lost 150 combat airplanes, 1,500 tanks, 1,200 artillery pieces, and 16 ships. The military expenditures of the two countries amounted to nearly $200 billion, and their economic losses amounted to $540 billion, thus greatly weakening the comprehensive national power of both sides.